In this day and age, one of the things that we use most is our phones, and for millions of people, it happens to be an iPhone. But as most of us know, phones weren't always rectangles with a screen on them. For a little while there, they looked a little funky with keyboards and tons of buttons, but something changed. Let's rewind back to 2005 to see where it all began. So, as most of us know, Apple wasn't always the biggest smartphone manufacturer in America. For a while, they only made computers, and when they began, the company was actually called Apple Computer Inc. Going into the 2000s, though, they kinda strayed off from just computers. And in the year 2001, they came out with the iPod, their very first portable music player. Now, where we are in 2005, they'd already made quite a few iPods, and they gained wild success. Most people and their mothers had an iPod, and for good reason. They were probably the best MP3 players on the market at that time. And as the iPod was a small electronic device that fits in your pocket, somewhat akin to, say, a phone, rumors started circling that Apple was going to be working on their own mobile phone. Now, it had already, at this point in 2005, been established that Steve Jobs saw touchscreen input as the future for mobile devices. He was never a huge fan of styluses, saying things like,
"Now, how are we going to communicate this? We don't want to carry around a mouse, right? So what are we going to do? Oh, a stylus, right? We're going to use a stylus." No. Who wants a stylus?
And that is kind of to be expected with Steve Jobs, as he has always been a little bit forward-thinking. Getting back on track, though, Apple somewhat began work on the iPhone in 2005, initially starting with the touchscreen user interface. As they do, rumors had began circulating about the iPhone, and people began wondering what it may look like. One piece of an interview I saw that was really interesting was from, I believe, 2006, when a CNBC reporter asked Steve Jobs,
"And Mr. Jobs, last question. I have an iPod Shuffle, and I am very curious and eager to know when I might be able to buy an iPhone. Can you tell me when that'll be available?"
You know, we never talk about unannounced products, so if we ever do announce something like that, I'd love to talk to you about it then.
All right. Well, we appreciate your joining us. Thanks again, and good luck with your newest store.
Thanks a lot.
Now, as you can see from this clip, Steve Jobs got a little bit nervous that someone may know stuff that they shouldn't, but clearly with his reaction, you can tell that they had something brewing. Let's keep in mind, by the way, that in 2005 and 2006, the most popular phones on the market looked like this. And then what comes to follow, you all probably are somewhat familiar with. Now, these earlier phones look pretty old today, but at the time, they were incredibly modern. So I bet you could only imagine the public's reaction when Steve Jobs went on stage in January 2007 to announce this. And this is how he unveiled it.
Today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. So, 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not three separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
His three device in one description was pretty accurate, I would say, for the time. If you look at the iPhone, it really was just that. A phone, internet communicator, and iPod all in one. This original iPhone really could not do much more than that. But I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. The fanfare around the announcement of the iPhone was huge, and it seemed like tons of people really did want to get their hands on the iPhone. I mean, think about it though. Most people had an iPod, so who wouldn't want the most advanced iPod and your phone to be one device? That, in 2007, sounds like the dream. Now, fast forward a little bit to the end of June 2007, and the iPhone finally launched. At launch, it cost $499 for a 4GB iPhone and $599 for an 8GB iPhone, like the one that I have here. And both of them required a 2-year contract with only AT&T. No multi-carrier support was offered for the original iPhone, at least at the time. It really could only be purchased on AT&T. So if you had, say, Verizon, Sprint, or T-Mobile, other huge carriers, you either had to wait or just wouldn't get an iPhone. It really was like nothing else at the time. There were very few touchscreen mobile phones in 2007, and if there were, they weren't nearly as advanced as the iPhone ended up being. The whole interface was quite fluid for the time, and even though it seems really limited now, when you look at it, it does do quite a bit, especially for a phone from 2007. And since it has been 18 years now since the iPhone released in North America, I'd like to take a look back at a bit of the iPhone's legacy and see just how it holds up as a product in 2025. Now, as I said before, the iPhone only launched with either 4 or 8GB storage options, which doesn't really seem like a lot nowadays, but when you consider the fact that some of the only things you'd be putting on your phone were music, maybe TV shows or movies, and some photos, it's really not that bad, because you couldn't download apps. That was one of the main limiting factors of the original iPhone. They didn't add an app store until iPhone OS 2.0, which launched with the iPhone 3G in 2008. I'll get to that phone later, but we're going to continue talking about the iPhone 2G in this. So, a couple months after the original launch, they added a 16GB storage option, as well as discontinuing the 4GB one. Now, it's important to keep in mind that if you're looking to get one for your collection, the 16GB models cannot run iOS 1.0, which I will get to in a second. iPhone OS 1.0 is incredibly bare bones, and it really is just the fundamentals of a phone. Starting from the top left, going to the bottom right, I'll go through a little bit about each app. First, you have SMS text messaging. That's literally it. iMessage didn't come to be until iOS 5. In 2011. And MMS messaging wasn't even supported at launch on the iPhone, so it really was just text. The calendar app would sync to and from your Mac, and even though it's pretty bare bones, there's really not much that a calendar app needs to do here. Photos and camera all combine into one thing. The camera is really just that. All you can do is take pictures and view them. You can't even focus, and you can't flip it because there was no front camera yet. So it's not the best quality camera, as you might imagine, but For 2007, it's not terrible, and if you're really in a pinch and for some reason only have an iPhone 2G on you, it will take pictures. And the Photos app will view your pictures, you can make albums, but most of that is handled by iPhoto on your Mac. I'd like to point out that I do keep mentioning needing a Mac, and that's because you did. You needed a Mac, or I believe you could have also used a Windows computer at the time, but really, you needed a computer with access to iTunes. Believe it or not, YouTube was a built-in app on iPhones going up until iOS 5. Now, YouTube was already owned by Google at the point that Apple put it on the iPhone, but they weren't gonna push their own app because it wasn't a thing. You couldn't have apps yet. And even when the App Store did come out, they kept YouTube for a couple years built in on the iPhone. The Stocks app has always been on iOS, and I can't say that I know the most about stocks, so I don't know if the app was great. Let me know in the comments if you have experience with the iOS 1.0 Stocks app. Now, believe it or not, Maps was not Apple Maps at this point. It actually was Google Maps. Again, they had some Google services built in to the iPhone. Android wasn't out yet, so it wasn't a competitor because it wasn't out yet. Weather is a very basic weather app with very basic temperature and conditions readouts. You might think that the app icon is interactive because it shows a sun with 73 degrees underneath of it. It's not interactive, actually. It just says 73 degrees, no matter where you are or what it actually is outside. They really just put it there just to have it. The Clock app is a clock. It's really not that different from the Clock app today because, I mean, there's not many functions that you could add or remove to a clock. The Calculator has actually been through quite a few design revisions, and this is obviously the very first one. It is, I think, the easiest way to tell if your device is on iOS 1.0 because only on very early iOS versions it had these brown icons on the home screen. Later versions added, I believe it would have been black and orange. So there's a very easy tell if it's on iOS 1.0 or not. And then continuing on, the Notes app, well, takes notes, you can write stuff down. They didn't have folders at this point, so it was really just a note list, but it gets the job done. I'm not really going to go into settings because, well, I mean, I think you can imagine what's in there, but there really weren't very many settings to tweak with because there wasn't a lot you could do at this point. The Phone app is definitely a phone app with most of the same functions. It had the contacts list built in, which was not originally its own app, and it was made its own app later on. That was originally just an iPod Touch function because those didn't have phones, but I guess they brought it to the iPhone later for some reason. The Mail app is one that I'm not very sure of the functions because you can't log into it anymore, but it would presumably show you your email and somewhat tie into the Mail app on your Mac. I can't test that, so again, let me know in the comments if there's any interesting functionality for the iPhone OS 1.0 Mail app. Safari had a very bare bones user interface. It did have tab support back then, and it did not have very many other buttons. There wasn't even a share button, which I thought was always there, but no, you would just have to copy and paste the link, like caveman days. And lastly, what I think to be the most interesting app on this entire phone, the iPod app. That's right, when it first came out, up until iOS 4, it was the iPod app, not music, and like if you couldn't tell already, there was no videos app on its own, so they combined all of the functionality of an iPod into one app. And it wasn't like this on iPod Touches. Those always had videos and music separate. But for whatever reason, on the iPhone, through iOS 4, all of the iPod functions were in one app. And I mean, yeah, it does iPod things. You got your music, first and foremost, with playlists, artists, and songs. There's also an albums view, which by default is tucked away into the Overflow More menu. What's interesting is that you could customize what the tab bar looked like, which isn't something that I believe was offered in many other iOS apps. But yeah, you can watch videos, listen to music, and they have cover flow, which I love cover flow. It's a great interface. Such a shame they removed it. But yeah, cover flow on the iPhone. So that's a quick look at all the software on the original iPhone. But what about the hardware? Well, this iPhone is very unique because it has this two-tone metal and black plastic design that was never seen again. The black plastic was for an antenna, and if you can imagine, it wasn't the most durable thing ever. That is clearly evident when you look at mine, which has a hole out of the bottom. Now, I got this phone from a yard sale, so I don't know where the hole came from, but there is definitely a hole in the bottom corner of my iPhone. And as with most first-gen iPhones, the back is incredibly scratched and a little dented. I don't hate it, and I think it adds a little bit of character because, like I said, a lot of them looked like this, and it's somewhat of like a metal patina, if that makes sense. But thankfully, the screen is intact. It's, from what I know, a pretty big failure point to see lines or black splotches on your screen, but my screen is intact, so that's great. The battery seems to hold up okay. I haven't really heavily used it because I don't have much of a heavy use case for it, but it doesn't die immediately, and that's always a good thing. And the legacy of the original iPhone continues on to this day. I mean, the home screen fundamentally hasn't changed that much since the original version of iPhone OS. Now, yeah, all the app icons look different and the design is different, but the layout of app icons with a dock at the bottom with 4 apps has been there since the very beginning. They, of course, added things like you couldn't rearrange your app icons even on iOS 1.0. There wasn't a reason to, but you couldn't. And they added that later when you could download new apps, but it's mostly the same, which is kind of pretty neat. For those interested, to get one on iPhone OS 1.0, it's a little bit of a complicated process, but if you have a bit of technological know-how, it shouldn't be that bad. I will link the tutorial that I watched in the video description because I couldn't make a tutorial. I tried, didn't go well. So use the one that I followed because that one's a little more clear than me. But yeah, the original iPhone lineage followed for quite a while, and 9 years later, the iPhone 7 was the last flagship iPhone, I should say, to follow the traditional home button layout. Now this is 7 Plus, and after this, the flagship was the iPhone 10, which is the first iPhone to bring Slide to Unlock. Now the home button stayed around up until earlier this year, when the iPhone 16e came out to replace the SE. So after the SE 3rd generation, there's no more home button iPhone. It's safe to say that the cultural impact and technological impact of the iPhone are pretty unmatched. One clear example of this is the fact that Google had been working on the first Android phone from before the iPhone came out. Originally, it would have looked like this, with a keyboard, somewhat like a BlackBerry. The iPhone came out, and the one that released looked like this. You can kind of tell that they took a bit of inspiration from the iPhone, and other manufacturers soon followed suit. It wasn't long until phones began to blend in and start to kind of look the same until today, when most phones do look the same. Most phones are a metal rectangle with glass on the front and back, a full screen display, some form of a hole punch camera, a couple cameras in the top left of the back, and overall, it's kind of boring, but it works pretty well. And that, my friends, is all owed to the original iPhone. Now, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you like this style of content, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace out. Oh, you're just waking up? Thank you.